So today we're going to be talking about the different kinds of grooming brushes and which will work best for your dog. This might look a little bit intimidating, but these are the everyday brushes I use in my salon. So we'll start over here and kind of work our way through the brushes, just explaining what they're for and for what breeds they'll work best for. So these are called Zoom Grooms. These are rubber curry brushes that actually came from horse people. These are excellent for getting rid of extra shedding coats on medium and short-haired dogs that have a double coat or a single coat. So things like a Whippet, a Pug, a Beagle, these are excellent. So next we have the very easily recognizable slicker brushes. I have a few varieties here. This is what I would call a curved paddle slicker, so it has a little bit of a curve to it. It also has quite short pins. So this would be good for something like a larger doodle that's kept in a short shave trim. This slicker has a little bit longer pins. This is my everyday slicker. I use it on almost every dog. It is by Chris Christensen, so it's a little bit more expensive, but this is a wonderful brush for everyday, almost every breed of dog. This is the longest pinned slicker I have. I use this for poodles and labradoodles, but also for big double-coated dogs like golden retrievers. So this slicker also has the kind of curved paddle to it, and it has the longest pins and the most pins. The length and the density of the pins help get all the way down to the skin of the dog and help detangle and demat the coat by separating all the hairs. So slicker brushes are actually one of the few brushes that you can use for all stages of the groom. For prep work, for dematting, detangling, for finishing, and for fluffing. So slicker brushes are your all-around everyday use brush that you're going to be using the most. So Greyhound combs come in many sizes and variations of the pins as well as colors. You don't need anything too fancy. Something with medium thin pins with a finer side and a coarser side will do just fine for your everyday pet grooming. Greyhound combs are used mostly for finish work. You're not going to be running these through mats or anything, so you'll use your Greyhound comb almost last when you're brushing. This is also a Greyhound comb, but actually it is the poodle variety, so you can see it has one size of teeth with one width all the way across, and this is so for bigger dogs, again, like the poodles and doodles, so we don't have to be fine-tooth combing the entire dog every time we comb. So they're not generally used in home grooming, but in case you see them, that's what they're for. So this is an Undercoat Rake. This is used for de-shedding larger, thicker coated breeds like Huskies, Malamutes, things like that. This has 2 rows of pins. They don't spin. The spinning pins don't do you any good. These are all stationary pins, and there's 2 layers, so these help get all the way down to the skin and pull out any loose undercoat. But because the pins are a little bit further away from each other, it's not going to have the same effect as the Greyhound comb, so it's kind of a wider tooth version of a comb to start out. So this is also an Undercoat Rake, but you might notice it looks a little bit different than this guy here. This is the, I guess, newer version or newer style of Undercoat Rake, where rather than pins, they're blades. These will cut coat. These are not for your everyday average groomer for running over the entire dog. This is for very small spots of dematting or getting a lot of undercoat out at once. So use these with a little more caution. This is your average dematting tool, but you can see it looks a lot like the other Undercoat Rake. That's because it's basically the same thing. It's just set at a different angle. So in order to use these, we'll show you how in our dematting video. I almost never use this. So I haven't actually been using pin brushes very long in my pet grooming, but ever since discovering these Chris Christensen pin brushes, I have been in love with them. They are wonderful brushes for dematting, but not causing skin irritation. It's not going to get as much done as quickly, but they're fabulous brushes and you don't need a harsh hand to use them. So a Zoom Groom again is used for short or medium double-coated dogs or single-coated dogs that shed. And the best way to use them is actually in a circular motion. You're not going to see too much coming off this guy because he doesn't have a ton of undercoat, but what I normally do is a quick circular motion and then I brush everything off. So we have our dog here, and you can see I've started kind of brushing out the front, but you can see where I have not brushed at all. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to use your slicker brush. So for this coat specifically, because it's long, it's thin, it's quite fine, but the base does need detangling, we're going to reverse it. So we're going to take our slicker and we're going to go against the coat. Just like that. Now for pressure when you're using your slicker brush, you should be able to run your slicker brush 3 times over your inner arm and not have any red marks come up. So you want to be pretty gentle with your slicker, but also pretty firm as well, but not where you're digging into the skin. Remember, you're brushing the hair, not the skin. So when it comes to your Greyhound combs, like I said, you do want to take a look at the pin width. That will really kind of tell you how much hair your comb's going to pick up. So this guy here has the tiniest little pin widths, and I use this specifically for faces, whereas this guy here has pretty thick pins, so it's not going to pick up quite as much. So for this dog here specifically, we're not at the point where I could actually run my Greyhound comb through. And you can tell because my comb gets stuck. So this dog will need a little bit more slickering right over here, but I can go ahead and run my comb through here. Now pin brushes aren't really gonna do too much for this guy here. This would more be for your golden retrievers or your Australian shepherds, or if you have a Yorkie or something like that with long silky hair that you're keeping in a longer cut, this is a good brush for that. But this, you can see it's not really gonna do too much other than just lightly detangle. So the dematting comb isn't really gonna do much for this coat either because he's not matted, he's just not been brushed out. So these aren't mats or tangles, they're just compacted hair, so this isn't really going to do much, but we will be showing you how to use this tool for dematting in our dematting video. And again, here we have the Undercoat Rake. Again, for this guy, because he doesn't have any undercoat, it's really not going to do too much. Yeah, this is more for dogs like your golden retrievers or even your Great Pyrenees or things like that. Okay, so this is my guy Wiley here, and as you can see, he has a very thick coat. So I'm going to be demonstrating the use of the undercoat rakes on Wiley. He doesn't have a ton of undercoat, but he has enough. So when I use this, I'm not line brushing with this. I don't separate the coat at all. I run this lightly and gently over the top of the coat. You can see how much that takes out. The thing with this, if you hit a tangle, you will cut your coat. So just make sure that when you're using these, that your coat is as straight or as matte-free as you can get it. So this is the other undercoat rake. This is the one that doesn't have blades, and this is the much safer version and my preference for undercoat rakes. Again, same thing, run it lightly over the top of the coat. The nice thing about these ones though, you can line brush with them, and it will remove a significant amount more of coat without doing any damage to their coat. Good boy, Wiley. So you can kind of see here that Wiley's bum doesn't look great. It's a little bit packed with coat. So rather than running over it with the undercoat rake first, I'm going to use my slicker brush. Now again, because he's a big dog, I'm holding my slicker brush in one hand, not like a pencil, just in one hand. Good boy. And then for finish work for this guy here, I always use my Greyhound comb. It gets rid of the most hair by far. I just run it through his coat. Good boy. You don't need a Furminator to get rid of lots of coat on a double-coated dog. So the most effective way to brush one of these big guys here with the double coats is to line brush. Line brushing is exactly as it sounds. You go through the coat line by line and brush it methodically. So I'm going to show you with the comb here. We'll start kind of right here, and we just go through, and as I move my hand up against the grain of the coat, I'm just letting layers of hair come down and be combed into my comb. And you can see how effectively I can keep track of where I am on the dog and make sure I brush every inch of their coat. So the reason we line brush a big guy like this here, and really line brush any breed, is so that you can keep track of where you are on the dog, making sure you're not going to miss any mats, but also making sure you're not going to miss any undercoat. It gets rid of the most amount of hair, and it doesn't have you going from different spots around the dog. It makes sure the entire dog is fully brushed.